Hey, divine leader, so grateful and in a state of joy that you are choosing to be here with us during this podcast. I'm really honored and blessed and excited to be joined by Tamika Auwai. Welcome, Tamika.
Thank you so much, Danielle. I am just pleased as punch to be here.
Tickle pink, happy as a
So
clam.
pink. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. And we're going to be rocking and rolling on some practical strategies about being a seven-figure spiritual leader, really in your wheelhouse, Tamika, which is, I know I'm simplifying it, but in the arena of copywriting. So our topic today is nurturing your audience for effortless enrollment. So, where would you kind of enter into that conversation? Because this is really for you entrepreneurs and coaches and healers and mentors, having to do with communication and the business strategy of really having nurture emails and communication. And I feel like as I'm kind of talking, spiraling in here, I'd almost love to start with the idea of relationship, the idea of community, because that's
Mm.
really, it feels like the heart of what we're going to talk about today. Does that feel like a good place to dive in?
Yeah, that feels like a good place to dive in. And then I have like a little follow-up to that I think might actually just flow into it nicely. So yeah, let's talk about relationship and community. Um, we when we're going forth to connect with our audience, when we're thinking about messages and copy and marketing channels and all of these things, at the heart of it there's an intention behind it. And one of the things that I think gets lost a lot is what that intention is, right? We get so trapped in that, like, what messages go out and what channels do I use and all of these pieces, that we actually forget that what we're aiming to do here as coaches, mentors, teachers, leaders is to lead. And you can lead yourself, certainly, but in service of a business, you're here to lead your community. You're here to lead your community, and you're here to lead them to a very specific end, right? Ideally, where it's in alignment to do so, the place that you're leading them to is to their transformation. You're leading them on a path from becoming aware that there is, circumstances or conditions or challenges or things happening in their lives that they don't particularly enjoy or want to experience, to a place of realizing that, oh my goodness, they have power and support and opportunities to learn how to transform that. And they can do that. They can do that with you. They can do that with you, right? But they can't see that unless you're standing in your leadership and you are calling forward that community, and you're giving them, sharing with them the messages that would inspire, the messages that would shift their perspective and their consciousness, so that they can actually step in and have that transformation that you can make available as a coach, mentor, and teacher. So I think that's one of the sort of the key pieces that I think really gets lost when we think about growing a community. It certainly gets lost when we think about nurturing a community. And the piece that as you were sort of thinking, where do we start? The thing that was coming to me is, again, that intentionality, or that the reason, the purpose behind nurturing your community often gets lost as well, right? So just as we get into the marketing place, and sometimes we forget that the reason we're doing all this is to call forward a community that we can help actually transform, sometimes we also forget, when we're thinking about nurturing, what the intention behind nurturing actually is as well. So I want to share that. Then the intention in my world and what we do at our agency, the intention behind nurturing is really making the I want to say strategic, and it's not just about strategy. There's a deeper connection there. There's a deeper feeling there that I can't quite articulate in this moment. But when we think about nurturing, we're thinking about providing for our community everything that they need to see, hear, feel, know, and understand to deepen that relationship so that they can step into a place of trust and belief and faith that you as the coach are the exact right coach, mentor, teacher, healer to support them. And that's really what nurture is for. We think sometimes, or it gets lost sometimes amongst other marketers, we think of the idea of nurture. We got to stay, we got to stay visible, hashtag stay visible. And we got to, be in their inboxes, and we got to, stay top of mind. But what is nurturing really about? Nurturing is really about ensuring that community that you are so called to serve actually receives what they need to receive in order to trust you and themselves to step into that container of transformation. That's what nurture really is about, from my perspective.
Yeah. And as we're talking about seven-figure spiritual leadership, the leadership aspect is really being amplified here in our conversation today, because it is about leading a community, a movement, something that's larger than ourselves, and that these nurturing messages, emails, communication are not only what you spoke about, the intention of them is leading them to their transformation, yet they're also transformative in the process. So that's what I really love about communicating. As I work with Toth, the keeper of the Akashic Records, is all about communicating and scribing and speaking, and that there really is that two-way conversation that's happening. Because in order to write these nurture emails, and I have been a client of yours, and you and your agency have done a nurture sequence, which is like a series of emails to go out. And so I've had firsthand amazing experience with you all, that the emails in and of themselves are transformative, and that is a key to the experience that the individual is having as they're reading them. And I feel like that's important to say, because as coaches, we love what we do. And then sometimes there's that idea of like, well, marketing or writing, like that's not what I do. But it really is kind of the same thing. You're still doing transformation, and you're still contributing through the messages that you're putting out there, ideally. So is there more that you would say about that? And I also feel like, just to get a little bit more context, because we jumped in about nurture, like what's the difference between nurture and lead generation? So that was like, is there anything else you want to add about how nurturing is transformational?
Yeah, absolutely. So you hit the nail on the head there, Danielle. It really, when you are stepping into creating nurture content of any kind, could be emails, could be social content, what have you. But when you're creating nurture content of any time and any kind, and then you have that intention of, again, leading people to transformation, leading your community to transformation, you really, you're kind of feeding two birds with one hand. Number one, you are in your leadership because you are, again, these messages are inherently transformational, right? When you are nurturing in the way that we do at Orisha, we are looking at how do we actually create a shift in perspective? How do we, said another way, how do we actually create a shift in consciousness every single time someone engages with our work? Every time someone engages with an email or a social post, how are we creating that subtle shift in consciousness for them that would open them up to see a new possibility, and that new possibility, potentially ending up in enrolling in our programs? And so I bring that up because that really, that understanding that nurture can be more than just I put a post out there to stay connected or to stay top of mind, and instead can actually be, I created a message that is designed to create that shift in perspective, to create that shift in consciousness. That difference really is how we start to create messages that lead to that piece of effortless enrollment. Because instead of having to put messages out there that are, kind of pulling people in and sort of using some of the fear and pouring salt on the wounds of pain and all of those pieces that I know are completely opposite to the way that you and Toth teach and share, right? Instead, we get to be in this place of shining the light in the new way of being, of thinking, of acting. And when we do that, we call forward people who are inherently ready to change. They are raising their hands to find out about how they can work with you. They are jumping onto your wait list. They are showing up on sales calls ready to step in because you've done that work through the nurture to actually help them see that, oh my goodness, working with you is the exact right step that they need to take, right? So that's sort of thing number one I want to expand upon in terms of, looking at nurture and the purpose of nurture and sort of the difference between what we might see other marketers or other business owners do. Right. So again, the way that I think is most aligned for this community is really, again, to start to think about what messages do I need to share to have someone who is aware of my work, aware of their problem, but not quite sure if they're in the right place, not quite sure if my services are right for them or my offerings are right for them. What messages will help them to subtly shift their consciousness, subtly open themselves up to the transformation I have available, right? That to me is the aligned path for seven-figure spiritual leaders. The path that is not going to work just because it's not in alignment. I mean, there are plenty of reasons it doesn't work, but mostly because it's not in alignment, is that piece of, oh, well, I better, really hammer on the pain, and I better really, create some false sense of scarcity or urgency, or, say things like, there'll never be an opportunity to buy again, if I don't, getting to that real sort of, old paradigm, to use your language, old paradigm way of selling and communicating, right? That does show up in some businesses and some nurture content that you'll see. But instead, we want to look towards what is actually going to help people along their path of evolution, what's going to help them along their path of transformation, right? So that's, I think that's kind of the biggest distinction between sort of, old paradigm, kind of nurture versus what you and I would see as being a much more aligned path. And then to answer your question around the difference between nurture marketing and lead gen. So they really work hand in hand, but lead gen ultimately is the process that you're going to take to call in new, members into your community, to use the very markety term, lead generation. A lead is a new individual who has chosen to follow you on social media or to join your email list, and they're brand new to your community, right? And so that's one aspect of your marketing that is certainly very important. There are all kinds of amazing ways that we can go forth and draw in, new aligned people into our communities. The job of nurture, however, is to ensure that those new leads receive the messages that are going to help them move closer and closer to stepping in to work with you. Sort of said in plain sort of marketer English, in our business, we talk about helping more new leads become new clients, right? When it's aligned for them to do so. But that ultimately is the difference. That ultimately is what nurture is doing. Nurture is taking those new leads who come and they've joined the list, they've joined your social media, and helping them again to receive that shift in perspective, to receive that, sort of that journey, to draw them along their buyer's journey, then, so that they are ready and self-selecting and raising their hands and leaning in, to step in and work with you. So if we're looking at sort of, again, I'm a marketer, so I use the marketing language. If we're looking at the traditional idea of a funnel, right? A funnel wherein, and all a funnel really is, forget kind of what every internet marketer has told you. All a funnel is, and every business does need one and does have one, is the process by which you attract new leads, then you nurture them, and then you eventually, again, if it's aligned to do so, you have them enroll in your programs, right? So it's a three-stage sort of process, which also equates to your ideal client's buyer's journey. They go through this place of joining your community and, realizing like, hey, there may be something here for me, to being nurtured where they, slowly but surely, we call it the lean in factor, start to lean in and say, oh my goodness, yes, everything that this mentor and teacher is sharing with me is just having me like have these massive sort of, and sometimes they're not even massive. Sometimes they're like the tiniest just shift in perspective, but having me see things in a whole new way, having me realize that, oh my goodness, if I just consider this, or if I, stop doing that and maybe consider something else instead, I could potentially receive the transformation or the outcome that I am, so hungry to receive, to ultimately coming to the place where they are like, yep, it's time. I'm going to step into that program. I'm going to raise my hand for a sales call. Right. So lead gen and nurture really work together. But I think the biggest mistake that I see a lot of leaders make at all across the board is that they get really focused. Some marketer somewhere has told them, sales in your business is a numbers game. And if you just have more people in your community, then ultimately you will see more sales. And perhaps that is true, perhaps. However, often what's happening is that instead of doing the job, letting nurture or creating nurture content that will do the job that nurture is supposed to do, again, create those shifts in perspective that would have someone raise their hand and want to work with you, we aren't doing that job. And so people are joining your list, they're joining your community, but they're not receiving what they need. And so they are either unsubscribing or they're putting you on snooze, meaning your emails are coming in and they're checked all the way out. They're not paying attention. And so when it does come time for you to have an enrollment campaign and say, hey, the program is open and available, those folks have all checked out. Often when we talk about that piece of, oh, I don't have, I'm not seeing, the numbers that I'd like to see in terms of enrollments, in terms of people raising their hand to have a sales call or what have you, it's actually that you're doing a fine job with generating new leads, but rather there isn't any intentional and strategic nurture happening to ensure that they're ready to raise their hand when you're ready to make that invitation. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's two things that you've said that I want to highlight, which is like when it's aligned for someone to step into, which really is honoring of the community, of the client, and that there's another side to that as well, which is when it's aligned for the coach as well, and not that like needy grasping.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta get a client. It's really this path of communication and building of relationships that I feel like is so important to kind of put in bold and highlight that you've been sliding in there, that I want to amplify. And then the other one is really also, and I'm kind of circling back to what I said earlier on, is I know for me, I had like a newsletter once a month, or, and then I went to twice a month, and then really now I'm so happy to be communicating on email and podcasts and social, because I see it as a service, as a contribution, as an extension of the transformation. It's a very different energy from like, am I annoying them, or am I imposing, or like what I see a lot with spiritual leaders is that there can be that sense of, well, visibility, that's a whole nother game. Yet there's that sense of like, am I bugging them? And the word nurture is you're nurturing them, you're giving to them, you're providing that perception shift all along the way. So this really feels so connected to the new paradigm and where we're headed. So Is there stuff that you're seeing that's working really well when it comes to nurturing? And then anything else you would share too about like kind of upping our nurture game without getting in
Mm.
on the content treadmill?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think first of all, I want to echo the energetic piece. The shift in perspective that I'm sharing today around looking at the intentionality of nurture, and seeing it as service and seeing it as being in your leadership for your community before they've even raised their hand to work with you. That shows up for almost all of our clients, whether or not they're deeply or openly spiritual or not. So you hit the nail on the head right there. And I think I just wanted to reiterate that piece, because I hope, in all this, again, when we talk about marketing topics, it's almost like sometimes we can kind of disassociate as spiritual entrepreneurs. It's like marketing's over here and then what I want to do, my leadership is here. But again, like really listening to that piece of nurture is designed. And when you think about nurture, the way that we're offering the perspective today is really, again, like you're in a place of leadership. You're in a place of leadership and you're delivering the messages that your people need to receive so that they are ready to step in when it's aligned for them. And so they're ready to step in when it's aligned for you. And there's that opening that happens when you know that you have more than enough people in your community who are deeply nurtured, who will step in at any point that you're ready to make spaces available. Like that is just the ultimate game changer. Okay, so bringing me back to the question you asked. So what is working? What's really working, Danielle, is understanding that nurture is not just one message, one time at band camp. Understanding that nurture, is just as the energetic quality of the word. Like nurture, when you think about nurture, you don't think of like, oh, I watered my plant one time, right? We think of like the care that we might put into, planting the seed and fertilizing and watering daily and making sure there's sun and speaking to the plant, really nicely, and on all of those pieces, encouraging that growth, right? So what's really working is understanding that nurture is a long game. It is not a magic pill that we, pop in, even if we have a sequence created and it's, 12 emails and all these pieces like we do at Arisha. It's not a just pop it in and off we go. I've nurtured now. I'm good to go. A nurture is really understanding that, again, when we're thinking about being in service to our community, we have to understand that some people, might be ready to work with you the moment you lock eyes. They just get that deep inner knowing and they are all in, all ready to go. And others will need a little bit more and a little bit more time. And so I think, sort of old paradigm was, the ideas, and this is where I kind of talk about anyone who knows anything about kind of traditional internet marketing funnels. There was this idea that you would, give forth a freebie and someone would join your list, and then you would send this very, well-written campaign. And then 10 days later, they would sign up for your program and it's, hey, here it is. And that doesn't exist. That's not reality anymore. There's maybe, again, like 1% of the people that you connect with might be ready to step in, if that, ready to step in right, the moment that they meet you. Instead, it's understanding that it may be more like 60 or 90 days before they feel, a little bit open to step in and work with you. It might even be as much as 6 months. And so really understanding that we need to be always in a state of respecting where our community is at and delivering the messages that they need to move them forward without, attachment, without, sort of frustration, but really understanding, okay, they just need a little bit more. What do they need? And really tapping into the pulse of that and delivering those messages. That's the biggest shift that I'm seeing working really well right now. It's just every client that we work with in our business has typically gone from this place of again, having, this souped up sort of top of funnel happening where, again, the freebie and the email sequence and the buy my thing now, right? They've got that going on. And then maybe they have some sort of a launch campaign that happens, a couple times a year where there's the big concerted effort of like a couple weeks of heavy emails and all of those pieces. And they're missing they're missing what needs to happen in between. It's fine. I'm not, speaking poorly of the old school top of funnel or the launch, framework. If they're working for you and they feel great, I'm all for it. Do it. And recognize that in both of those cases, people might step in and be attracted by your launch, your masterclass, your what have you, but they still might not be ready to buy. Your launch might actually be a lead generation vehicle wherein new people are attracted to your work, but they're not ready to buy yet. And so you need to be thinking always about how can I nurture them between the next invitation that I would like to offer for them, and understand that even if they don't say yes with that invitation, well, what do I offer them next? Recognizing, of course, there's boundaries, because perhaps there are people in your community who may never buy, right? They may never buy. And this isn't an invitation to go down the rabbit hole of, really trying to push, because then you start to get into the pushing energy, right? When we're trying to get every single person who's joined our list, whether they're ready or not, we're oriented in the wrong way. We really want to be in the place of leadership. Who is ready to be led today versus who am I trying to sort of save, right? But we want to think about, am I in a consistent place of nurturing so that I am providing for my community what they need if they're not ready yet, right? So that's kind of the biggest what's working. And then I think the flip of that, what's not working truly is again, trying to rush the relationship, trying to give, overgive, provide all this, that paradigm of giving so much value. I've got to give all my stuff. I've got to make another freebie today and tomorrow and the next day, in the hopes that will really encourage people to see my value and see that my work is for them. That's not really working either. So again, when I talk about providing for your community what they need, I'm not really talking about creating more how-to or more freebies. I'm really, again, talking about creating content that does that work of creating a deep perspective shift, a shift in consciousness for your community, so that they can see what's going on for them in a new way, so that they can raise their hand and find out about how you can support them, right? So that piece is not really working. I think, what is also working, and what speaks to your question around how do we create this content without getting ourselves stuck in this place of always creating new, more, is really taking the time to understand, what are those core nurture messages that my community really needs. We can do the deep work of sort of excavating and understanding and connecting with who our ideal client is, not just when they're, who our ideal client is at the moment that they're ready to buy, which is a lot of the ideal client work that many engage in, right? They think about who's ready to step in right now, which is absolutely valuable. We do want to know what it's like, or who our clients are who are ready to buy. We want to know what that avatar is, but we also want to back it up a little bit and think about, what's going on for that client who maybe is not ready to buy. Right? What about who's the client we're working with today? Where were they 6 months ago? And what was what was going on through their head? What kinds of beliefs were they sort of being stopped by, or what kind of things were they were trying, and what kind of myths were they maybe buying into, right? So when we back it up a little bit and connect with our ideal client just a few steps back, right? We can start to identify some messages that we know are pretty typical for that avatar, for that audience. And then we can start to create content around those themes, identifying those themes, and then using that as the sort of the backbone of what we're going to show up and share online, allows us to actually get into a place of being able to create content once and then reuse it in many different ways, right? When we know what our core themes are that we want to communicate, we can create a live stream and then have that transcribed and turn it into an email, and then have that email broken down into social posts, right? We're not in this place of, I'm coming up with 365 different things that I need to say every single day, something brand new. I need to create something brand new. We get to let go of that. If we're like, these are the core messages that my people need to receive, we can start to think a little bit more strategically about how we create content. And that is a large part of the work that I do at my agency, right? It's really thinking about what are those core themes? And then we can go in a place of creating, a nurture sequence for email. And then we can bring that into social media, and we can encourage, our clients to take those themes and make podcasts or make videos or, what have you. So really allow for sort of the use of multimedia. But we're not saying brand new different things all the time. We're actually saying the same thing over and over again, because really, if we're not being a broken record in a loving way for our community before they're ready to step in, we're kind of doing it wrong. They don't need to hear a bunch of different things. They need to receive that core message, and they might need to receive it in a couple different ways and shades until, that point at which it hits them, it really, really connects with them at the core. And they're like, oh, that's what that really means. So we've all had that experience, right? Danielle, it's like, you might have been following, coach for quite some time. And then that one time they post one thing and you're sort of like, it hits, it hits you on that day. And suddenly you're open to, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna book that call. Right. So really tap into what that experience, I would invite those listening to like really tap into that, what that experience has been like for them. Being in that space of sort of maybe, scoping out someone's work and then, hanging out. And then, one time, think about that one post, that they maybe made, or that one email that landed in your inbox that really just like hit you at the core and had you take action. That's the same, effect we want to create for our communities. And we don't do that by coming up with something brand new all the time necessarily, right? We do that by really getting clear on what messages do they need to move along their buyer's journey, to move from, new lead who's brand new to the community to feeling nurtured and feeling like, oh my goodness, this coach, mentor, teacher knows about my problem better than I even could describe it myself. And oh my goodness, they're having me think about this problem or how I could solve it in a whole new way. And yeah, you know what? I do want to hit reply. I do want to book a sales call, right? That's really it serves both sides, which is what I love so much about this work and this way of approaching things, is that we're being in deep service to our community, whether or not they work with us, but we're also doing the job of helping to be, successful, growing business owners and to lead people towards that enrollment as well, right? They don't, and they shouldn't, in my view, be, sort of detached and separated. It's one and the same. Helping lead them along their buyer's journey is the way that we create effortless enrollment and, expansion in our business and our bottom line.
Thank you. So as we're wrapping up here, you have a beautiful gift here, which is the Nurture Opportunity Scorecard. And we've included the link in the show notes here. So would you just share a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a self-assessment that you can take, and you can start to look at what you've been doing so far, as far as nurture and on your email and nurture on your social. And there's a little video that comes with it that kind of explains what you should be looking at it, but it helps you take a closer look at what you've been doing so far in the name of nurture, to really highlight any gaps that might be present, and also to showcase any opportunities that you can use to sort of close the gap. So it's a really comprehensive tool that you can sort of guide yourself through as an introduction to how do I get more strategic and intentional with my nurture, so that I can, again, set up this experience where I'm really in service to my community and experiencing effortless enrollment as well.
Wonderful. So we invite you to pick up this gift and go into your nurture scorecard. And Tamika, thank you so much for being here. And I hope that, divine leader, you are feeling nurtured by this conversation, that this has inspired you to also continue to nurture your community for your seven-figure spiritual leadership movement, and to really be in that new paradigm that's aligned and is a form of communication. So any last words, Tamika?
Just thank you so much for having me here. And again, I echo Danielle's sentiments. I hope that this has given you a new perspective around what it means to show up for your community, outside of the times when we're selling things and outside of the times when we're trying to attract new folks to our community. What happens in the middle of our funnel, what happens in the middle of that relationship is intended to be deep nurture, and it's as you heard, in service of your mission and in service of your business.
Wonderful. Thank you.